This is a unique weekend. It's a Memorial Day weekend. It's a weekend that we set aside for remembering those who have paid the ultimate price for serving our country. It is not to be confused with Veterans Day. I get that a lot. A lot of people are somewhat confused by this detail. Veterans Day is a day we remember everyone who served. That is in November, November 11th. But on Memorial Day, we recognize those that have paid the ultimate price, those who have given their life for this country. It is a unique time. It is celebrated every year on the last Monday of May. In many cases, it is also a time of family, fun, and extra day off of work. It was first set aside shortly after the American Civil War. According to Wikipedia, the all-knowing internet, it says in 1968, General John Logan of the Grand Army of the Republic, an organization of former Union soldiers, established Decoration Day as a time for a nation to decorate the graves of the Union dead with flowers. By the 20th century, this practice had merged with many different local traditions, both Union and Confederate. Eventually, out of these merged memorials, the modern Memorial Day observance was extended to honor all who gave their lives while serving in the American Armed Forces. When we look at Memorial Day, the question that I often ponder myself, and been asked a couple of times by certain individuals, is why do people give their life for a cause? Why do people die, essentially, for something, as simple as their country? Have you ever given thought to that? Because if you look at our country today, we see all the turmoil, all the problems, and everybody on the streets, and they're not getting along. They're not really doing anything of value, in my opinion. And we have a whole bunch of people running the show that we don't trust, we don't really like, and we've got things going every which way. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. We're not all that thrilled. Nobody is. Why would someone choose to die for it? Good question, huh? On one hand, that question makes a lot of sense because, as I understand, there's approximately 1.2 million lives lost in America during wartime in our history. 1.2 million American dead. And it's something like 40% of all armed force death occur during peacetime. In other words, that's only, the 1.2 only occurs during wartime, but there's another untold number that happen during peacetime. Training accidents, issues like that. And the question then becomes, why? This seems like a loss. In fact, if you look at all the numbers of the entirety of the known losses that American forces have suffered, we find it equals the entirety of our modern military and then some. That seems like just a waste. Why would people give their lives to serve a country, particularly this country in this modern time? There's the question I get asked. I cannot give an answer for everyone, nor can I begin to understand the motives, the reasons, the logic, or the answers that these fallen warriors would give. I cannot begin to understand that. However, I do believe that Jesus made a statement that shows to some degrees a possible answer or motivation that some of these men and women have given. It's because of a selfless love for their country, for people, their family perhaps, their comrade in arms. You see, in John 15, Jesus states, "Greater love has no one than this, than a man would lay down his life for his friends." This morning, we are going to look at this statement. In the preceding command, we will find that there is a command, an example, and a self-evident truth that boils down to this idea of loving each other. If you will, you can turn with me to John chapter 15. We'll start at the 12th verse. Answer just two verses, all we're going to be reading. It says this, John 15:12. It says, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." We start off that with this simple observation. There is a command. Jesus says, "My command is this." Command. What does that mean? Well, for one thing, it means it's not a suggestion. Okay? It's not a suggestion. It's not something you can just go ahead and occasionally do if I feel like it. No, Jesus is telling his followers to do something. This is equivalent, if you will, just to bring it down. It is an example of a military structure, right? If the private doesn't do what the captain says, there are consequences to be had. Bottom line. In this case, Jesus is the supreme commander. He is the maker, the ruler, the Lord of all. And he says, "My command." It's not a suggestion. It's not something that we can randomly roll out and do. This is something we have to intentionally obey. Every day, with every interaction, with everything we do, his command. This is something that should be there. What is that command? What is that authority, if we will? It says this, to love each other as I have loved you. There's the command right there. It has something to do. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. This kind of love is not a emotional love. This is not a gushy feeling in the pit of your stomach, that you get sometimes, or the awkwardness of a teenage boy as he's trying to ask a girl out to prom, okay? That's not the kind of love we're talking about here. This kind of love is the self-sacrificial giving of oneself for another. This kind of love is a mother who, though tired as heck, stays awake rocking her screaming baby when he's got a fever at night, sacrificing herself for trying to comfort the baby. That's the example of love we need with everyone that we deal with. It says it's not something that we can just, I don't know what you say. It's not something we can just put into existence on our feelings. It's a conscientious decision that we have to make daily as we interact with people. Love is an action verb. It's not a noun. It's not an idea. It's not something that's out there. It's an action point. I don't know about you, but maybe you've seen some different ideas out there about love, right? I don't know. It was probably back in the 70s when they had the love, peace, and joy, whatever, concerts and all that stuff. And all those are grand ideas out there, but they aren't actually followed into practice with people. Love is something we do daily. Love is something we do. We set out and we put one foot in front of the other. That is love. It's not easy. It is hard. It is difficult. It's a verb. It's an action verb. It tells us to do something. Jesus' command is to love each other. But you know what? Here's the example, he said. That's the command. Love each other. But he says there is an example. And that is me. Love each other as I have loved you. Recently, I just had a conversation with an individual down at work, a little bit short. And he brought up this point of the Bible when Paul tells husbands to love your wives. That's basically the standpoint. It says, husbands, love your wives. Pretty simple, straightforward. But what they miss is the latter half of that verse. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The reality is we do not fully grasp or understand exactly the depth of Christ's love. So when he says, love each other as I have loved you, we need to explore that a little more. It's really simple for us to say things like, well, Christ died, for the church. Christ died for these people. That's what we need to be willing to do, right? Willing to die for these people. I would agree that's probably true. But you know what? I would submit to you it's a lot harder to live for someone than to die for somebody. It's a lot harder to live for somebody than it is to die for somebody. You know, it only takes a little bit of bravo, just a little bit, to die for somebody. And oftentimes, who knows what kicks in? It's not logic in your mind. You don't get a second guess that. You just step in front of the moving truck to swoop the child out of the way. You're on your way to meet your maker, right? You didn't think about it. You just acted. Yes, that's good. That's great. That's selfless love. Yes, absolutely. But I would tell you, you got to go one step further when you have to live for somebody. That's when you have to do it daily, every day. Step in front of that truck, barely escaping death, time and time and time and time again. Knowing each time that sometime, one time, it will be one time too many and you're not going to make it. That's selfless love. That's willing to give everything up and to live it on a daily basis. But we have to understand what Christ gave up also. He didn't give up just his life, right? You have to understand, this is the guy, the God, who made the universe by speaking into it, into existence, with no other forms or no other anything, just his very words. He formed all the stars out there. With his very words, he formed the very first human beings. And with his very words, he set into motion everything that has existed and been created. That very God, who lived with that kind of power, that kind of ability, that kind of glory, that kind of magnificence, left his throne in heaven and came to earth, the place he created. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Who does that? And then not only did he come to earth, he didn't come to earth as a big old VIP, right? He didn't come rolling down with his limousine. He didn't come in with a grand old marching, didn't live in a great big palace, didn't do anything that we could comprehend as luxury in a human form. The God who created everything was born in a barn. God literally gave up everything for you and me. What does he say there? He says, love each other as I have loved you. The example of Jesus Christ puts love in such a grand thing. Basically means we're willing to sacrifice everything. Not only our position, not only our stuff, not only our abilities, our rights, our privileges, right up to our very life. Jesus Christ paid the ultimate sacrifice. And he also gave up relationships. Don't forget that. When he was on the cross, the Father turned his back on him because of all the sin on the world was placed on him. Understand the most significant things that Jesus held on to. His relationship with his Father. The glory of heaven, the eternal throne, the supreme power. He gave all that up that he might have an eternal life with you. And he tells you and me today, this morning, what he says is, love each other as I have loved you. I cannot speak to individuals who've given their life for this country. But I can tell you this. a lot of them have given their lives, given more than their lives, that others might live, that others might enjoy life. And we say that, but it's a self-evident truth. When he says there, greater love has no one than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friends. That's kind of like saying it's a no-brainer. I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's a tautology. It's a statement of self-evident truth. 2 + 2 = 4, right? Basic line. Mathematical, it's obvious. When we talk about loving each other, it is seen in our examples of our daily lives. Now, we had the opportunity this week to peruse a website of the Medal of Honor receipts. It's the Medal of Honor Society. Those who've been given the Medal of Honor for various and etc. reasons. And it's really interesting if you go back in history. It goes all the way back to the American Civil War and then every conflict since then. There have been a couple. And it's been very interesting to actually sit down and read the, I don't know, what do you call it, the citation, if you will. And one stuck out to me as I was reading it this week. It was an individual by the name of Hector Santiago Colon. And it was read, this reads, very simple, but it explains the idea of what a self-evident truth looks like. An individual who is a army man in Vietnam says that Specialist Santiago Colon distinguished himself at his post at the cost of his life while serving as a gunner in the mortar platoon of Company B. While serving as a perimeter sentry, Specialist Colon heard a distinct movement in the heavily wooded area to his front and flanks. Immediately, he alerted his fellow sentries in the area to move to their foxholes and remain alert for enemy probing forces. From the wooded area around his heavy enemy automatic weapons, a small arm fire suddenly broke out, but extreme darkness made it very difficult for the precise location and identification of this hostile force. Only the muzzle flashes from the enemy weapons indicated their positions. Specialist Santiago Colon and other members of his platoon immediately began to repel the attackers using hand grenades, anti-personnel mines, and small arms fire. Due to the heavy volume of enemy fire and exploding grenades around him, a North Vietnamese soldier was able to crawl undetected to their position. Suddenly, the enemy soldier lobbed the hand grenade into the foxhole. Realizing that there was no time to throw the grenade out of his position, Santiago Colon retrieved the grenade, tucked it into his stomach, turning away from his comrades, and absorbed the full impact of the blast. His heroic self-sacrifice saved the lives of those who occupied the foxhole with him and provided them with the inspiration to continue fighting until they had forced the enemy to retreat. By his gallantry at the cost of his life and the highest traditions of military service, Santiago Colon has reflected great credit upon himself, his unit, and the U.S. Army. That is a citation of a man who gave up everything for people in his foxhole. If you only cared about yourself, you would have turned and run. You would have turned and ran. Gotten away from there. A self-evident truth. If you say you love somebody, your actions are going to follow. If you really do love somebody, what you do will show that, right? And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you go into the situation, know it's going to hurt you, but you do it anyway. You do it anyway. A good example of that is one that I quoted in the past of this example. D-Day, Utah Beach, during World War II. Before they could launch their attack, the Germans had placed obstacles on the beaches, which would have made it impossible for landing craft to come ashore. Right? So engineers were told the night before the invasion that they would have to clear those said obstacles, including mines and, different iron pieces that stuck out. All these things that made it impossible to get troops ashore. The engineers were told before they could even go in that the casualty rate was between 66 and 80%. But they had a job to do, and they were told to do it. Jay Richer, Private Jay Richer, went out there to do it. They set out. Him and his 3-man crew were given a section, and they were told to clear out the beach. They went in there. They achieved their obstacle at the cost of 2 of the 3 in that group. These men did the job, knowing full well the cost and the casualty reports. But they did it anyway. Why? Greater love for something greater than themselves. Greater love for something greater than themselves. When we say it, it's a self-evident truth. It'll show itself by how we behave and what we do. This morning we have seen the command to love one another. This command applies to our lives as Christians too. It's not just the service members, those we remember on Memorial Day. This is a challenge for us that occurs every day, because every day we encounter other people. Every day we have this problem. But today, perhaps of all days, we take a look at our lives and we can see there are examples, not only of Jesus himself, but others who gave their lives at it for a cause far greater than themselves. It's altogether fitting that we remember loving each other sometimes requires a great gift. This weekend on Memorial Day, as we remember the fallen soldiers of our great nation, let us also remember we are commanded to love one another. Then following in the example of Jesus, understanding our actions are self-evident. Let us always remember, greater love has no one than this, and a man will lay down his life for his friends. Let's close with a word of prayer.